You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 113 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. In this episode, we will be sharing part 1 of our quarterly SAA and COSA speaker meeting, and this one will feature Julie P. from Ohio speaking on behalf of COSA. This was recorded the first weekend of November, and unfortunately I was unable to attend. We had a busy program weekend lined up that weekend. The Giving Thanks event was the day before, and just had a lot of stuff going on, and wasn't quite able to make it, but I'm grateful that we had our speakers recorded, and that I got the links for those. In Julie's share, she did talk about boundaries, which prompted me to find a reading from Answers in the Heart around boundaries, and this is from June 3rd. And it says, "It is an old and ironic habit of human beings to run faster when we have lost our way." Rollo May. Our boundaries are both inside and outside ourselves. No one can set them for us. We can only set them. When we come into recovery, boundaries were often unfamiliar. We may wonder, what are they? How do we use them? Many of us come from families where, as children, our boundaries were disregarded, creating a pattern we continue to act on as adults. Starting to set boundaries for ourselves takes time and practice. Because the experience is unfamiliar, we may often find ourselves veering between two extremes, holding back for fear of blurring our boundaries, or acting as if we have no boundaries at all. But our willingness to set boundaries and to stick with them brings a clearer sense of who we are. We begin to learn where we start and end. We start to learn the same about other people. With boundaries comes a new sense of self-respect, because they are our affirmation to ourselves that we are not objects to be trampled on or used, but we are human beings with dignity. In the meditation at the end, I know my limits, and if I don't, I have every right to learn them. Yeah, there were a few other readings in Answers in the Heart that dealt with boundaries, but I really enjoyed this one. Like so many of us that come into program, a lot of us had a hard time establishing boundaries, and it is such an important program tool to learn. I'm just about ready to turn it over to the recording with Julie P., but before doing so, I wanted to mention that I will be reading some listener emails at the end of this podcast, as well as a few YouTube comments and playing a little bit of music. And now, without further ado, here is Julie P. at the quarterly SAA and COSA speaker meeting. I hope you enjoy it.
I really appreciate everyone's service. So I was asked to share on what life was like before COSA. So here goes. Here's my first part. If you had asked me before I found COSA, before I got into recovery, what my childhood was like or what my growing up years were like, I would have said they were absolutely idyllic. I grew up out in the country. I didn't have really a want for anything. I had come by most things pretty easy. School was easy. Sports was easy. And I would say that my biggest complaint had probably been that, things were kind of boring. My life was kind of boring. And that led to a lot of daydreaming, which I will get into a little bit later. I absolutely idolized my father. He was the fun dad. He took us swimming and cannonballed me, 20 feet in the air and 20 feet away. And I thought he was the biggest, strongest guy ever. Turns out he's like 5'7" and 120 soaking wet. But I didn't know that back then. At my 4th birthday party, he had pinned the tail on the 1975 Gran Torino in the driveway instead of the donkey on the side of the wall, that was all pinned up for my birthday party. That's what you did in the 70s. You pinned the tail on the donkey, right? And my little girlfriends and I, we laughed for years after that, actually. Like, my dad was just the best. But one day he got really angry and he told my brother and me to go into the woods and get a switch. And I really didn't know what a switch was, but I saw what my brother was doing. So I just followed. And my dad proceeded to beat the tar out of my brother in front of me. And I thought, well, he won't do that to me. Like, we're buddies. Like, I'm special. Like, I had the little nightgown that said, I'm daddy's little girl. And he beat me so hard that day, I could not sit down for a week. There were welts on the backs of my legs. And I knew even at 6 years old that I should lie to the neighbor lady when she asked me, what happened to your legs? Because it was summertime. And we both knew I was lying when I said I wrecked on my bike. But I remember feeling shame probably for the first time that day, and covering up for bad behavior. When I was 16, my father was nice enough to pass along some information to our foreign exchange student that I was probably not worth sending to college since I was just going to get married and have babies anyway. And it confirmed that I was just less than. I was less than for being a girl. And the things that girls did were just not as important. Girl sports weren't as important. It didn't matter that I earned a scholarship. And this is back in the 80s. And I was playing on a college scholarship. And it just didn't seem to matter. It was always very much minimized. And I was minimized. And that sent a huge message to me. And at the same time, I was being taught nothing about my spirituality, my mental health, my emotional health. The biggest life lesson I got growing up was from my brother, who told me, don't ever let anybody beat you up, because then everybody's going to want to kick your butt. And so I was like, okay. So all I did was just armor up. I was ready for everybody else's cheap shots or, their arrows or whatever. I was ready for that. I was absolutely prepared all the time. So I just didn't let my guard down. I didn't trust anyone. But I also did not pick on anyone else. I knew what that felt like because my brother was pretty much the biggest bully in my life that I've ever had, truly. And no one was really protecting me. There was nobody to stand up for me. My brother was bigger, faster, stronger, and way meaner than even I could be. And, like I said, I learned how to armor up. So in getting into recovery, looking back, my home was very hostile. There were very few boundaries. One of the boundaries was that if there was a door shut, you had to knock before going in. So I knew that I would be safe in my room. I spent a lot of time in my room. In fact, I spent so much time in my room that one time I left to go on a trip for a weekend. Like, I left on a Friday morning and I didn't come back until Sunday night. And one of my brother's friends came over and said, hey, where's Julie? And my brother said, she's in her room. Like, I was gone for 3 days and he did not notice. That's how much I avoided him, just because. And they all thought that was really funny. But now I look back and go, maybe that was not the best environment. I spent a lot of time listening to music and just wishing my life away. The only really bright spot was I was successful in school and sports. And so I just kept going. So I did go to college, again, without any life tools. I put myself in some very, very bad situations. My freshman year of college, I ended up getting sexually assaulted. I'd never reported it. In fact, I never even told anyone until I was probably 46, 47 years old, I was listening to a fourth step being given by another COSA that I love very much. And she said something that actually just snapped something in my head. And I thought, oh my gosh, that wasn't a nasty thing that happened to me. That was an assault. And COSA gave me the language and the tools to call bad behavior and bad things for exactly what they were. I've said oftentimes, I could put a lot of lipstick on a pig, even though it's still a pig. I could dress it up and prance it down the road and act like it was not a pig. Just made a lot of excuses for a lot of really awful behavior. Anyway, I left that situation being thankful for my life, because I thought the only thing to follow this would be that this person is going to kill me when this is all done. And I left there being extremely thankful that this person let me go. He let me go. But I immediately I just went into denial. I think I was probably still in a little bit of trauma, shock, and dissociation at that point. But I didn't ever report that. I had gone through all of the list of things that I had done wrong to put myself in this situation. I was, underage drinking, and gosh, I knew this person, and I voluntarily went to this place. And then I was literally physically brawling with, again, someone who was way bigger than me, way stronger. I had the whole trial already set in my mind. So the only choice for me at that point, I thought, bury it, move on. About 2 years later, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. My mom was a really big champion of, you can do anything that you want to do. You have choices that I didn't have when I was your age, and, you're going to college, and I never had that opportunity. And then she was gone, and I was left with my dad, who was not trustworthy, and my brother, who was a giant bully. And I think I felt abandoned for the first time, really. It was when I lost my mom. And that was really, really difficult. I know that she would never do that voluntarily, but it still felt like that. I was young. And my dad was real depressed at first, and then he started dating, and he didn't really want me around, and he made no bones about it. He really wanted me gone out of that house, and I was essentially homeless. So it was summertime, and so I ended up hanging out with this guy, and he was he was an athlete like me, only he was a big time athlete. Like, he was Division I, and he went to this big university, and his mother had left when he was 5. And I remember him saying to me, as I was crying about losing my mother and mourning, I must have been a real drag at 20 years old to hang out with. But I remember him saying to me, I'm not sure if it's worse never having had a mom or losing a mom that you grew up with. And that always stuck with me, because I thought, gosh, I don't think there's a competition for crappiest experience, but that would you rather? It's one of those. But I was really grateful to him for holding space for me before that was really a thing. I remember being very grateful that I had someplace to live that summer. But one night he also got very angry, and he held a baseball bat over my head. Again, thought I was going to die. And I left that room very grateful to be alive. I also felt like very much a betrayed piece of trash, that he thought so little of me, that on one hand, holding a lot of space and me crying on his shoulder, and then the next. And for about the last 25 years, he has reached out to me periodically. And his first question is, do you still hate me? Because I left that room and I never spoke to him again. I just completely cut him off. Like, that was not safe for me. And I was really actually proud of that, that I had been, so afraid. But recently I found out that he and probably 300 athletes from that university were either molested or sexually violated by a team doctor. And I have chosen to attribute that night of violence to this. The timelines just work out. But I don't even know that to be true. And I don't feel responsible. Neither of us had the tools or the language. Right after this, I met my first husband. That did not go well because obviously I divorced him at some point. We were married for 19 years. And part of what I had spoken about at the convention this past year was after about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years of marriage, I had gone to a counselor and I spent about 30 minutes talking about all of the things that he was doing and not doing. And he was this and he was that. And I got all done. And I said to the counselor, so what do you think? The counselor said, Julie, I think you have a problem with boundaries. And I said, I don't need boundaries. I'm married. And like I said, he's probably still reeling from that. I hope he's remembering that, this counselor somewhere. So I left that marriage, still not having boundaries, and I didn't know it. I thought he was the problem. That many years later, after 15 years after that, I still thought he had all the problems. I'm not going to say he doesn't have any problems, but I'm going to say I needed boundaries and I didn't know it. And that left me with virtually having learned nothing from a 19-year relationship. So I swore off all men, convinced I was going to live a quiet little life with my children. My daughter was in college. I just had one child at home still, but I should have prefaced this with saying no disrespect to any newcomers. But when I hear a newcomer say, I'm just going to move on, I'm going to get rid of this person, I'm just going to, as I call it, I refer to it as I'm just going to cut this gangrenous leg off. I don't really have the disease. I'm just going to cut this leg off and then I'll be fine, because all of this relates to that other person. And once I get rid of that person, I'll be fine. And I've done that a couple of times, as I've shown. There are more stories, as you can probably tell, of me leaving the situation. But the point is that I attributed that to the other person 100%. And as we learn in the traditions, there is a role that we all play. And I have played. So when I hear other COSAs say, I'm daydreaming about, the day I can be done and the day that this happens, it always seems to make sense. But what I learned was wherever I go, there I am. And nothing is truer for me personally, because within a month of that 19-year relationship ending, I was already dating my current husband. I was dating him without boundaries, without a voice, without my higher power, and worse, without knowing my worth, without revising all of my core beliefs. I still had all those faulty core beliefs, playing those tapes in my head over and over and over again, and trying so hard to hide all those. The coconut game, just trying to hide them. Hide them. So, I met my husband. He's a great guy. It was just an absolute love fest. I felt like this was my absolute last chance at happiness and love. And after 3 years, we were married. We got married in 2015. It was a small wedding. Our children, our parents, and a few really close friends were there. I cried. It was really sweet. It was really heartfelt too. And D-Day happened 33 days later. It didn't last long. My sweet love story, I always say, ended in a slasher movie. And I knew I needed help. I was beside myself. I was completely devastated. I remember my husband looking at me at one point and saying to me, "Gosh, Julie, you look like you're just like you're just dangling from a string." And I was holding on with very little. So I went to some Al-Anon meetings, and those people were so sweet and kind, and I loved Al-Anon. But they had a meeting topic one night about their alcoholic, their addict falling off the wagon and how to still love them. And I, as you know, as a new COSA, went running and screaming away from that meeting saying those people have no idea what I'm going through. And I never went back. So I ended up going to my first COSA meeting in 2016, cried through the whole thing. The kind of cry, like heaving, snotting, the whole thing. And what I was there, the people I was there with were people who were laughing and joking, and they were helping one another, and they respected one another, and they were talking about how grateful they were to be there. And I was looking kind of like to show up to a meeting where they were like, "Get your pitchforks and lanterns and we ride at dawn and we're going to burn this place to the ground." I was ready for that kind of meeting, and that never happened. And I thought for sure that they were going to kick me out. And especially when they realized I wasn't there for spiritual development. That's not why I was there. I was an imposter. I was a real savage. And I thought for sure when they found out who I really was, that I was not going to be on that team anymore. But they let me still come back. I perseverated on my husband, his acting out partners, and what they all thought of me. I was obsessed with that. I thought my higher power hated me. So when I heard others speak so eloquently of their higher power, gosh, I wanted that. I just didn't think that was in my reach, though, because I was convinced that my higher power hated me. That's actually why I was here. My higher power. This was revenge straight from my higher power. You may notice the theme that I thought everything was about me. And it's just where I was. It's just where I was. I hated the world. I didn't trust men. I didn't like men. And I really didn't trust women, and I did not trust women. Oh my gosh. I second guessed everything. My whole world. Yeah, everything was not as it seemed for me. And I could not find safety anywhere. Which is to say, at that point, I couldn't find safety in anyone. That was an issue. So again, I kept going into meetings. I remember hearing somebody tell me, "You are safe here." And that's something that I didn't even know I needed to hear. You're safe. And wow, that just meant so much to me at that point. Because I had never felt that kind of fear in my life. I had never been a real fearful person. Like I said, I was all armored up, which is really just the opposite. It looks like a fear, but it's the same thing. It's just fear with a lot of layers to it. But I never acknowledged that fear. So I was enmeshed, awash in shame and humiliation. I really didn't think I was lovable. And I was hopeless for the first time in my life. Before then, I had always had hope, like things would get better. But I really thought that this was it for me. And when this didn't appear to be working out, I thought, this is probably the end for me. My husband did not choose recovery for almost 3 years. I took this incredibly personal. There were many trickle truths, but that was an accident as well, because I think he had lost track of what he had told me and what was truth and what he had already told me. And so it was a death by 1,000 cuts. And so just like every other relationship, I left. I cut him off. I filed for divorce. I was done negotiating with an addict. That's what I kept telling myself. I'm done. I'm not going to negotiate anymore. Luckily, at this time, I was in a COSA step study and I had a co-sponsor. We were determined to get healthy, chasing recovery and chasing after our higher power. And this was so essential to my recovery, the real beginning of my recovery. I was accountable to her. I learned how to trust her. And I continued to learn. So I have just a snapshot of the things that I've learned. And number one is it isn't personal. And I hated hearing that when I came into program. Oh my gosh, I hated hearing that. There is nothing more personal than your most personal relationship. And of course, your sexual relationship, right? So I really disliked when people would say, you just can't take it so personally. After recovery and doing more work, I realized that my husband did not mindfully choose his addiction. I do believe that this addiction is easy and seductive and secretive. Like they say, it will take you further than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, and cost you more than you could ever pay. And unfortunately, even saying that, I think about, I have a lot of compassion for my husband and the things that he's been through and the pain that he has endured. And I know that he did not bargain for that. I know that. But all the same, where I was in my recovery, I felt like because he didn't choose recovery, he wasn't choosing me, or he wasn't choosing us, like we weren't worth it. And so I took that as rejection. And worse, I took it as a measure of my worth. And I really believed that. Like I bathed in that. I chose to do that. And I made his journey about me, and it was not. The next thing I learned is that we are all on our own journey. And that is so freeing to me, to be able to detach and see someone on their own journey. And as awful as it is to watch someone walk into the fire, I cannot save anyone. That is a job description of a higher power. And if that is where their higher power needs for them to go, I will never stand in the way of that. And I am responsible for my own journey. That's what I am responsible for. I'm first accountable to my higher power, and then myself, and then what I choose to commit to. I am accountable to that. I kept wanting my husband to save me. I just so badly wanted him to just take all the pain away, to say the right thing, to do the right thing. And so I could feel better. It's like taking your partner's temperature to see if you're sick. I would do that constantly. And I think he did it too. And we were doing it to one another. But I do remember looking at him one night and just realizing, like, he's sick. Like, it's no different if he had the flu. Like, this guy is sick. And I am standing in the middle of the hardware store screaming at him to whip me up some bread. Just make the bread. Just make the bread. Just make me feel better. And I am responsible for my own bread and my own journey. I also feel that I have a wonderful higher power that I truly believe in, but I also believe that there is an enemy. And the enemy to my higher power and myself is very tireless. Somebody told a story about there are 17 doors in their business, and they have to go around and check all 17 doors. And that is what the enemy is like. If you have a door open, if you have a window that they could jiggle just to get in, that one thought, just that one little thing, and that's how the enemy gets in. And I have to be very vigilant about what I'm thinking, what I am saying, and what I am doing. I have to be very vigilant about that, because the enemy will just, go to town with me. And that has been proven. So I must stay vigilant. The next thing is, it is a saying, but one day at a time. Anytime I go into the future, I take fear with me. I cannot help. Usually the reason I'm going into the future is because I have fear. And I was so grateful. I think it was like 3:00 in the morning. I had a program member send me something that was, it was written by a human, obviously, but it was from their higher power. And it said, stay in today the past is already done. There's nothing we can do about it, and stay in today. The future is nothing but fear. But if you must go into the future, take me with you. And that has changed everything for me. The only time I get to think about the future is if I take my higher power with me. And that changes everything. Changes it all. Usually when I would go into the future, I would be all by myself, and enemy was working on me. So I really have to be mindful of that. I discovered in program that I have needs and I have emotions. I came into the program with, the three basic emotions: happy, sad, and PO'd. And now I have found that, there's a place for anger. There's really not a place for rage for me anymore. I did a huge 7th step on that one, and I'm really grateful for that. But rage and we had to break up. It made me feel so powerful. It made me feel like I was in control, but nothing could be more opposite. I started doing the things I was being told to do, program tools. I accepted myself. And I think accepting myself and accepting where I am and where I was probably one of the most courageous things I've done, just to accept it. And I wasn't going to be a 2-for-1. I do feel like the enemy is aware that a really good and helpful partner will follow their SA to the depths. As low as they go, that partner will be right behind them. And I wasn't going to be that 2-for-1. I wasn't going to be the freebie. Boundaries are a whole different ball of wax. But life today is much better than I ever dreamt about. All those hours I spent fantasizing in my room by myself. And even while I was in program, I fantasized about, how much better I wanted my life to be. And if I was really honest, my higher power has delivered so much more than my human mind could have imagined. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm really proud of my husband and what he's done in his recovery. I'm proud of our marriage. And I'm really honored to speak today and to tell you all about my journey. Another boundary I've learned is that everyone has earned the right to hear my story. But I know you have. I know you've all been through it. And I appreciate you for being here and hearing my story. So thank you.
Many thanks to Julie for sharing her story at the speaker meeting. I always enjoy hearing share from COSAs, and I am especially grateful to share them here on the podcast. I also wanted to give a shout out to the SAA and COSA speaker meeting committee. We have a few people that are in charge of lining up speakers, keeping the meetings running smoothly, recording each speaker, and also getting permission to share their stories here on the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. So big time shout out for the committee. Like mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I will be reading some listener emails, some YouTube comments, and playing a bit of music before closing out this episode. And I thought I would start out with a few YouTube comments we've gotten over the past month. The first one here is from episode 57, which is John R. sharing at the SAA and COSA speaker meeting. And it says, "Today was my first day at a meet," and I think that meant meeting. "I'm tired of this illness, desperate, and will start work with a sponsor tomorrow." That's so awesome. And I hope you do find a meeting with a sponsor and start working the steps. And the other one that we just got was on episode 112, where Sean P. shared his first step. And it says, "Love your podcast and would love to attend the noon meeting sometime." Awesome. Yeah, please do. All 7 meetings are listed at the saa-recovery.org website under meetings. Each day has its own name, but they are all basically Monday Zoom room, Tuesday Zoom room, etc. And they are based at 12 p.m. Pacific time, There are a few other meetings that are called noon Zoom meetings, but those are based in Texas, I believe. And although this is a men's meeting, recently we have made sure that on the description for the meetings that it says men and non-binary. So anyone who identifies as a man or non-binary is welcome at these meetings. And now moving on to a few emails. We have received quite a few emails over the past month or so. I've been responding to as many as possible. A lot of them were potential guests for upcoming episodes of the podcast. And because of the holidays, I think I will start scheduling new recordings in January. So anyone that I have responded to and we started working out some interest in being a future guest, I will be getting back to you as soon as possible to start scheduling those in. But again, that probably won't be until January that I start scheduling. And similar to this one, I haven't responded to this one yet, but I wanted to read it here. And it says, "Hi, Jason. My name is A, and first, thank you so much for your service. I wanted to let you know that the ripples of the stones of hope you throw reach the shores across oceans. I am a sex addict in the UK and part of an SAA group that I helped set up as part of my service in the program. My home group was long established, but Step 12 and Tradition 5 drove me to make use of myself, and we are now a growing fellowship. I'm working my 9th and maintenance steps, that's 10, 11, and 12, and living in recovery the last 2.5 years, and now enjoy the healing and beauty that is sponsorship. The program has done so much for me. Inspired in part by yourself, I have put together a podcast and hope to do more going into 2024. I blog on my recovery-themed site, and I wondered if you would be interested in my story of experience, strength, and hope for a forthcoming episode. Great to hear from you. Yours in recovery, A." And yes, I have listened to the first episode of his podcast and would definitely be interested in having him as a guest. And because of the 8-hour time difference between California and the UK, that one's a difficult one to schedule. So I'll be working at scheduling something probably on a weekend for that. But I will be responding to that email very shortly. And here's another one. "Hello, I've been in SAA for almost 2 years and listening to your podcast for almost 1 year. I really enjoy listening to the stories and shares. I feel like I want to share my story with you. I'm doing pretty well in recovery and am 59 years old. My father was a sex addict, and I was an only child and latchkey kid, and my mom was pretty overbearing. I was a very successful educator and very well known. My discovery day was very public, TV, newspapers, online, etc. I have had amazing support from a variety of sources, including my sponsor, friends, colleagues, family, and especially my wife. If you are interested in hearing more, I'd be very open to being on your podcast. I've been inspired to help others by telling my story. Thank you." And yes, I will definitely be reaching out to you for scheduling a recording. So grateful for these emails. And this one just came in a few days ago and was a very quick response. And says, "Hello, I've listened to the first 2 podcasts in your series, and I'm very thankful you put this resource out there. I've recently just gained a sponsor, and one of my first exercises for Step 1 is to identify which of your podcasts you feel may be helpful towards Step 1. If you have any suggestions, I would love your input. Thank you, M." And I did respond back with the episodes that we have shared first step recordings. The first one that we ever did was with my friend Rye, and that was on episode 26. I have since had to pull that episode at the request of Rye, along with episode 51 that he was a guest. But I do have those up on Dropbox. Those are private links that aren't available to the public. Rye was concerned about having his episodes searchable by the public, and he felt that he would like to keep those more private. So if you're interested in those episodes, please let me know, and I'd be happy to get you those links. The other episodes that we've done first steps on are episodes 44 with my friend Brandon, episode 69 with Chip, who's been on a few episodes, episode 79 with Jeff, and recently episodes 107 with Andrew, and just this past episode 112 with Sean. So those are all first step episodes. And the last set of emails that I wanted to read comes from T in South Carolina. And we've had a few back and forth, so I wanted to read a little bit of each of those. And the first one I got says, "Hello, thank you truly for helping in the creation of this pod. It is helping to guide me back on track. Speaking of tracks, listening to Tool for the first time. Wow. This is also helping immensely. Will you please send me some tracks any way, anyhow, list or link or anything? I truly enjoyed every track on episode 9, and that was I Came to Believe, Finding a Higher Power Through Music." And back to the email. "Just anything to help catapult me into working my sobriety with the guidance of music. It's become an outer circle for me. Thanks again, T in South Carolina." The next one, I had sent some links, and it says, "Thank you. The music is truly helping me on my road to recovery." The next one was a little bit more elaborate, and it says, "Thank you. With my job, I have a lot of windshield time. This has allowed a number of my character defects to manifest itself. However, with the music, I have now etched listening/creating a playlist as an outer circle behavior. Before listening to the Bay Area SAA YouTube channel, I didn't know how to create a playlist, but I Googled it. And I've never listened to Tool or a multitude of other songs/artists you share. Truly enjoying and desperately needed the YouTube podcast, which I just discovered back in episode 1, etc. Anyway, feel free to share and paraphrase this as needed. I'm a recovering sex addict here in South Carolina, and the YouTube/podcast/killer music and all truly helped me on my path to sobriety. Thank you." And yeah, you are so welcome. And I'm really super stoked that you have found some great music through the podcast. I have mentioned so many times that my higher power speaks to me through music, and I have a deep, deep connection with music and recovery. So I like to share what I can. The couple of emails that I didn't read on this episode have had some listener shares for some music that is part of their recovery, and I will be covering that on another episode of the podcast. So with that, I did want to share some music on this episode. 3 pieces of music in particular. And I know a lot of end of the year Spotify Wrapped, and I forget what Apple Music calls it, but the top artists and songs that have been played over the year for myself, it comes as no surprise. Heilung is number 1, Tool is number 2, and Vince Guaraldi is number 3. And I've been talking about a lot of them recently here on the podcast. And Vince Guaraldi being the Jazz from the Charlie Brown, Snoopy cartoons. Really enjoyed listening to those over the past few months, and they have brought me a sense of peace. So I've had trouble with my headspace recently. I've mentioned it here on the podcast, going through some anxiety and depression, some changes at work that are causing some issues. One of which is not being able to listen to podcasts and music that usually keep me grounded during the day. Another is not being able to fully participate in the noon meeting. I'm able to join Zoom meetings, but I usually am only able to pop in for a little bit and don't get the full benefit of being in the meeting full time. And that's taken a toll on my mental health. And so I've been turning to music a lot lately in meditation, in prayer, etc. And so the first song that I wanted to play here is from Michael Franti and Spearhead, and I've played some of his music on previous episodes, but I love this song called Pray for Grace. Just the words in this really speak to me and help me recognize that I can ask for help from my higher power to lift me up. So here is Michael Franti and Spearhead and the song Pray for Grace.
Why must I feel like this today? I'm a soldier but afraid sometimes to face the things that may block the sun from shining rays and fill my life with shades of gray. And still I long to find a way. So today I pray for grace. I take a moment to myself so I can hear myself, fear myself and beware myself. Life's addictions and afflictions cause abrasion from the friction. Sometimes it's easier to live in fiction. I can run, but I can't hide from the pains that reside down deep inside. There is no pill that can be swallowed. There is no guru that can be followed. There's no escaping from my own history. Those that I hurt and those that hurt me. I was dead for a million years before I was born, and I'll be dead for a million more after I'm gone. So I live to give something that can live on, like the way you hum a song when the music's on, like the warmth of the sand when the sun goes down, and I'm sitting with myself, nobody else is around. But why must
love that. And yeah, so many Michael Franti songs are in my spiritual playlists, and I'll be sharing some more in the future. So going back to my Apple Music Rewind, or whatever it is called, the last two tracks that I wanted to play were from Heilung and Tool. And the first one from Heilung I have actually played before on episode 30 of the podcast, and I did play this one from the live Lifa album, and the song is called Filia Iar. On the Lifa version, it is Filia Iar /Futhork, and on the album version, they are two separate tracks. I've been using this one in meditation. The live version, I believe, is about 10 to 13 minutes, somewhere in that range. The studio version is 20 minutes if you combine the two. And the first four and a half minutes is just ambient sound. And on episode 30, I played some of the vocal parts from each of the songs. And for this episode, I did want to play the ambient part of Filia Iar. One of my friends in program has set up a 20-minute meditation meeting once a week, and I've been listening to this as I meditate. I've tried a couple different ways of meditating during the time, but this one usually pulls me into a deep trance. Very droney and ethereal, and I absolutely love it. So this is the beginning portion of Heilung's Filia Iar. incredible piece of music. And it's funny, this is not my favorite Heilung track, but it is probably one of my most played because I do use it a lot for meditation. And sadly, I will not be able to join the ritual in Los Angeles this next coming week. I did a lot of planning, but logistically it was just too difficult to do the 6-hour drive down. But I am keeping my fingers crossed that they'll be coming back to the US sometime in the near future. Tonight I just got to watch the drummer in a live stream on Facebook with a couple of my Facebook friends, and it was just so fun. Anyway, the other song that I wanted to focus on is from Tool, and it is called Reflection. This is part of what is called the Holy Trinity on their Lateralis album, Disposition, which I played on episode 42. Then comes Reflection, and the last part is Triad, which I played on episode 50. And what I'm going to be playing is actually something that I recorded with a few friends that I met on Facebook. We have a band that we've individually recorded our parts and reassembled all of them. So before playing it, I did want to read some lyrics. It starts off pretty dark and ends up in this beautiful place. I have come curiously close to the end, though beneath my self-indulgent, pitiful hole, defeated, I concede and move closer. I may find comfort here. I may find peace within the emptiness. How pitiful. It's calling me. And in my darkest moment, feeble and weeping, the moon tells me a secret, a confidant. As full and bright as I am, this light is not my own. A million light reflections pass over me. The source is bright and endless. She resuscitates the hopeless. Without her, we are lifeless satellites drifting. And as I pull my head out, I am without one doubt. Don't want to be down here soothing my narcissism. I must crucify the ego before it's far too late and pray the light lifts me out. I'm going to play 2 clips here. The first clip will be instrumental at the beginning where I'm not playing, but you can hear the lovely violin and percussion, bass, and synthesizer that we have. Love the arrangement here. And yeah, the next part is the last part of the song. I'll be playing a little bit of my guitar solo going into the last part of the song. So crucify the ego before it's far too late and leave behind this place so negative and blind and cynical. And you will come to find that we are all one mind, capable of all that's imagined and all conceivable. So let the light touch you, so let the words spill through, and let them pass right through, bringing out our hope and reason before we pine away. We put out 2 different versions of the song, one of them using a drum machine, and the second one, which I just played, had the percussion. I believe it's on a cajon, which is kind of a percussive box. But in the first video, each of us wrote down our reflections on the song, and I wanted to read what I wrote for that. A year after Tool's Lateralis album came out, I got into recovery and started to really connect with the lyrics of this album. The Holy Trinity, Disposition, Reflection, Triad, had become a hypnotic meditation for me musically. The further I delved into my step work and understanding myself, the more I really connected with the lyrics in Reflection. Self-defeating inner thoughts keeping me down, self-centeredness keeping me unaware of the people around me in my life. Hitting bottom with nowhere else to turn, I found help. Connecting with others going through the same pain and healing, I found hope in a moment of darkness. Reflection really captures the darkest moment and praying for the light to lift us out. Tool's music is my light in the darkness. And so here is Reflection.
So crucify the ego before it's far too late, and leave behind this place so negative and blind and cynical, and you will come to find that we are all one mind, capable of all that's imagining unconceivable. So let the light touch you, and let the words spill through, and let the paths break through, bringing out our hope and reason.
Such a fantastic piece of music. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I've been saving this one for a long time. I wanted to play the version that I was honored to collaborate with some other musicians and put that out on Facebook and on YouTube. And one of the things that reminded me of this is we recorded a version of Tool's song Fear Inoculum last year, and we never put it out as a video. We did all of the audio, and I just got a reminder a few days ago to film my video. And I have not been doing a lot with my guitar lately, so this was a wonderful reminder of what a healing instrument that is for me, and to pick that up and finish filming my video so we can put that video out to the world. Anyway, with that, I am going to wrap up this episode. And like I've mentioned before, I've got a few more emails to read on the next episode, which will be part 2 of the SAA and COSA speaker meeting. Got another Joe and Charlie episode set up, and I'll also be recording another Experience, Strength, and Hope share at our noon Zoom meeting next week. And so that will give me a few episodes to put out throughout December and early January. And I've also mentioned previously that I will be putting these out every other week because of the busyness of the holidays. So if you did want to provide feedback for the podcast, you can reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. And if you wanted to get a hold of me personally, you can reach me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. And thank you so much for tuning into this episode. And as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.